Today's story is about the true murders that ravaged the northwest of the United States in the 1970s. The serial killer who would commit these horrendous crimes would go on to inspire the creation of the Academy Award-winning psychological horror movie, The Silence of the Lambs. But before we get started, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Raphael, and I'm a lawyer who has, over the years, come across the most disturbing, vile, and heart-wrenching murders, mysteries, and disappearances. But among them all, one category stands unparalleled in its sheer terror: the unexplained. Welcome to my channel where I bring these haunting stories to light. Together, we shall embark on a journey where we unravel dark mysteries, explore true crime, and delve into the bizarre, the wacky, and the unexplained. If this piques your curiosity, I want you to summon the like button to the stand so I know that I have your full support. And also, I want to see how good of a lawyer you are. There is going to be a random Easter egg that appears somewhere in the video, and the first person who finds it and comments on what it is and includes a timestamp will have their comment pinned to the top of the comment section below. So, are you ready? Let's go. When Theodore Cowell was born on November 24th, 1946, his mother, Eleanor Cowell, said that he was the apple of her eye. Throughout the years, she would say that he would always be her precious son. In fact, those words would be the last thing that she would ever say to him. But despite the internal happiness of delivering a healthy baby boy, Theodore's birth wasn't necessarily a happy occasion. You see, Theodore was born out of wedlock when Eleanor Cowell was only 22 years old. During the 1940s, there was a serious stigma surrounding a child being born out of wedlock. As such, Eleanor was urged to give up the child, especially since the stigma not only centered around her, but extended to the woman's family as well. As a compromise, Theodore's grandparents took him in and raised him as their own. As a result, Theodore actually grew up believing that Eleanor Cowell was his older sister and his grandparents were his mum and dad. Theodore's actual dad was said to be a sailor named Jack Worthington. However, historians nor police could ever find a military record of this man. Many people actually believe that Theodore's father was Samuel Cowell, Louisa's father, who was said to be an abusive alcoholic both in the community and inside the family home. The rumor surrounding family incest was never actually officially confirmed or denied by the family, but it was nevertheless part of the town gossip in Philadelphia, where the 4 members of the Cowell family would eventually move to and live in for the next 10 years. All of this would finally change, however, in 1950, when Eleanor Cowell decided to start fresh and give Theodore a chance to finally have the normality that she always craved for herself and her son. In that year, she would trek nearly 3,000 miles to move to Tacoma, Washington, where she would finally get a chance at meeting the love of her life and Theodore's eventual stepfather, Johnny. The following year, on the 19th of May, 1951, wedding bells would ring and they would marry. Theodore's relationship with Johnny wasn't exactly what you call cordial. Whilst Johnny never swayed from being a father figure to Theodore, Theodore, on the other hand, would often act out and lash out at Johnny. Supposedly stemming from internal resentment and jealousy, their relationship would continue to be tense and their home life wasn't always amicable. Outside the house, Theodore also struggled. He was shy and small and frequently was a target of bullying by his classmates. Coupled with a speech impediment, he was never seen nor heard, and for much of his childhood, he was the outsider who so longingly wanted in. Theodore's relationship with Johnny wasn't exactly what you call cordial. Whilst Johnny never swayed from being a father figure to Theodore, Theodore, on the other hand, would often act out and lash out at Johnny. Supposedly stemming from internal resentment and jealousy, their relationship would continue to be tense and their home life wasn't always amicable. Outside the house, Theodore also struggled. He was shy and small and frequently was a target of bullying by his classmates. Coupled with a speech impediment, he was neither seen nor heard, and for much of his childhood he was the outsider who so longingly wanted in. But we eventually all have a glow up, and so did Theodore. By the time he graduated high school and entered college, he finally made it to the popular table. Practicing in front of a mirror, diligently enunciating syllables, his speech impediment slowly vanished. He also developed a soothing charisma that was warm and inviting, and for the girls, infatuating. It also didn't hurt that Theodore finally grew out of that skinny girl-like frame to a stronger, athletic figure. Wielding a chiseled jaw and protruding out to the world with his sky blue eyes, a once sidelined scrawny boy was now a hit with the ladies, and he was also a hit with the books. After a period of studying Chinese and psychology in the fall of 1973, he was accepted to the Seattle University of Law in hopes of being a lawyer like yours truly. But Theodore wasn't the only one whose life was beginning to blossom on campus. Only a couple of blocks away, Linda Ann Healy, a student from the University of Washington, was slowly opening her bright blue eyes and smiling with excitement. The 21-year-old was not only a popular student who majored in psychology, she was bright, outgoing, and very camera ready. See, Linda wasn't just a college student. She was also a reporter who was in charge of the weather and ski reports on the local radio station. This morning was like every other. With her alarm blazing at 5:30 a.m, Linda slowly made her way out of her bed quietly, hoping to not wake up her sleeping roommates. Grabbing her bag, she knew that this day would be long and tiring. Not only did she have work, she had to attend class straight after her broadcast, and later in the afternoon, attend choir practice at the UW campus. Knowing that at least, after this long-winded day, she would be able to have a few drinks with her roommates at the local tavern, Dante's, she smiled and stepped out into the brisk morning air. Like clockwork the next morning, as soon as Linda's alarm started beeping, Linda was up and away. Another day at her radio station, Northwest Ski Reports, and another full day of class and singing. But this time, things were different. With a faint buzzing of an alarm in the background, Linda's roommate slowly opened the door. Sluggish and annoyed that Linda didn't turn her alarm off before she left, Barbara Little entered her room, looked at the neatly made bed, and turned the alarm off. Walking away, she paused. As clean and tidy as Linda was, she never made her bed. With a slight look of defiance, Barbara realized, hey, today is another day. Maybe today, Linda thought the same. But Linda never got another day. Through screams and shocks and weeping tears, the little street of 5517 12th Avenue was filled with blaring lights and sirens of the police. Linda Ann Healy was missing. Ambushed in the dead of night, her killer assaulted her, drugged her, and carried her off into the chilly night without a trace. It would take more than a year for her body to be found in the Taylor Mountain, Washington. But Linda Healy's horrific murder wasn't an anomaly. It would mark the start of a string of disappearances along the northwest corridor of the United States. Donna Gail Manson, Susan Rancourt, Roberta Parks, and Brenda Carroll Ball were among the many women who would disappear over the next few months, disappearing without a trace. Fear spread among the population. Pressure mounted on law enforcement agencies, but the scarcity of physical evidence severely hampered any possibility of finding the perpetrator. Police were also reluctant in providing any substantial information to reporters due to the fear that it might compromise their investigation. What was clear, however, were the similarities between the victims and the disappearances, the fact that it all took place at night, usually along construction work, and they were normally within a week of midterms or final exams. All the victims were also wearing slacks or blue jeans when they disappeared, and at many crime scenes, there was sightings of a man walking with a cast or a sling and driving a brown or tan Volkswagen Beetle. For Theodore, these disappearances didn't really seem to faze him. I mean, not only was he outside of the demographic, he had bigger issues. He was flunking law school. Growing more and more recluse, he started attending night school and taking long drives to clear his head. He did have a shining light, however. A few months earlier, he met Elizabeth Kendall at the Sandpiper Tavern in Seattle. A 24-year-old brunette divorcee with a 2-year-old daughter, she just graduated from University of Utah. Despite public sentiment about dating a single mother, Theodore didn't actually care. He'd fallen in love, and his determination then and there was to protect his new family. Elizabeth Kendall would later comment that their chemistry was incredible, and that as soon as they met, Theodore was already planning the wedding and naming the kids. As she would say, a perfect prince. But sometimes things don't always go as planned. Frequent fights between the pair and miswordly accusations would result in Theodore moving out of the family home and moving to Utah. There, he would continue law school, and there, his life would change forever. As he studied his first year law curriculum a second time, he was devastated to find out that his studying woes would get worse. Commenting on other students, he remarked that they had the intellectual capacity that he did not. He found the classes completely incomprehensible. Looking at the mirror, he stared back at his blue eyes. He was a failure. But as Theodore's woes were getting worse, there was finally a break in the case of the missing women, whose disappearances has now crossed over state lines to Idaho, Utah, and Colorado. What would break the case, however, would be a survivor. In the late afternoon of November 8th, 18-year-old telephone operator Carol Durant was walking back to her car after visiting the bookstore at Fashion Place Mall. Whilst a spate of abductions and killings brought caution and fear to many people, Carol Durant was not fazed by being out alone in public. After all, it was the 70s, and while Salt Lake City, the capital of Utah, boasted more than 170,000 residents, the city and the surrounding areas felt, for the most part, like a tight-knit community. As darkness crept, Carol shivered. Winter was here, and she couldn't wait to get back home to dive into the warm mystery of her new novel. Walking briskly, she was within eyesight of her car when she heard a distinct shuffling behind her. "Ma'am," an urgent voice behind her said. "Please wait." Carol turned around to see a 6-foot-tall man with a look of concern on his face. Dressed in slacks, with a neat shirt and a coat, his look of concern turned into a look of authority. "Ma'am, are you the owner of a Camaro parked in the Sears entrance?" Hesitantly, Carol said, "Yes." Slowly reaching into his coat pocket, he pulled out a shiny piece of metal. "My name is Officer Roseland of the Salt Lake City Police Department. I'm afraid your car has been broken into." Fear turned into relief, and then turned into frustration. She had just got that car. With a nudge from Officer Roseland, she proceeded to follow him towards a car park to see the state of her car. A few seconds later, Carol glared into a red Camaro's passenger side, expecting the worst. But everything was there. She pulled open the door handle and opened the glove box. Everything looked like it should have been there, and was there. Turning to the officer, she looked confused. "My car doesn't seem to be broken into." "I can see some damage," Officer Roseland quickly responded. "Look, don't worry. We need to get you back to a police station to make a statement. We already have a suspect arrested at the precinct." Carol was hesitant, but was reminded of the police badge that the officer had shown her just moments before. With a last look at her Camaro, she slowly opened the doors to the officer's brown Volkswagen Beetle. Hopping into the driver's seat, Theodore Cole turned to face Carol and smiled. The failure of law school would never distract from the real dark ambitions of Theodore. His charms had persuaded, deceived, and coerced so many over the years. From his mother, Eleanor Cole, to his stepfather, Johnny Bundy. Young Ted had always played a character. With a subtle dual personality, Ted Bundy presented himself as a charming and normal person to the outside world while harboring violent and sadistic fantasies. To the outside world, he was a diligent and aspiring student who had high hopes for success and fame. He was charming to his teachers and fellow students, and with a contrast of him driving a brown Volkswagen Beetle unapologetically around town, He portrayed the image of being welcoming and non-threatening. But he was always evil. As Ted Bundy drove Carol towards a sunken forest on the outskirts of town, he started counting. 12, 13, 14. That's who Carol was. Victim number 14. There were some anomalies here and there, Ted rationalized as he stared in the moonlight road. But that didn't matter. He'd started killing when he was a young boy. Uncoordinated and an outsider, he inflicted pain to innocent animals, cruelly stabbing and beheading the pets and other neighborhood animals who would unfortunately cross his path. He quickly moved on to murdering 8-year-old Anne-Marie Burr when he was barely 14 years old. His tendency of cruelness at such a young age could only ever lead him to becoming one thing: a monster. As Bundy slowly drifted his car in the opposite direction of the police station, he suddenly pulled over to the curb outside of McLivin Elementary School. It was at this moment that Carol knew that something was wrong. Heart racing and demanding to know what was happening, she turned to the person in the driver's seat, realizing that she trusted someone she should not have. Staring at Bundy, she gasped, "Where are you taking me?" However, Bundy was silent. Glazed eyes, he just continued to stare into the distance. Carol's life was beginning to flash before her eyes. A young 18-year-old with so much left in her life, so much opportunity to live, love, and do good. A young 18-year-old whose future would never be known, not to her or her parents. Picturing the sadness and the hopelessness of her parents, all of a sudden she felt life sink into her. She was not going to be another victim. Bundy himself was slightly dazed. Touching the scratch above his eyes, he took out a gun. During the struggle, he could only actually handcuff one of Carol's wrists. To scare her into compliance, he pointed the gun at Carol, but Carol refused to bow down to such a threat. She continued to scream and struggle until finally she managed to fall backwards out of the passenger door. Carol Durant would end up being one of the few lucky women who managed to escape from one of the most infamous serial killers in history, Ted Bundy. On August 16, 1975, an officer noticed a suspicious Volkswagen driving around recklessly in his patrol area. After a short chase, he was able to finally pull the vehicle over, and he found handcuffs in the back of the car. Subsequently, he was able to arrest the driver. The officer actually had no clue who that man was. You see, during the 1970s, police lines of communication between state borders were not that advanced, and interstate warrants for arrest required officers to manually input the names and identifiers of the person arrested by making a number of phone calls. But after these phone calls were made, it was very clear who this unidentified man was. It was Ted Bundy. Following his arrest, Bundy was identified as the man who tried to kidnap Carol Durant. Acting as his own defense lawyer, in March 1976, he was convicted of aggravated kidnapping, which put him behind bars while investigators tried to connect him to the many unsolved murders in Washington, Colorado, and Utah. On December 30, 1977, he managed to escape from jail. I don't believe it either. Whilst he was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list, this escape brought on a series of disgusting and horrific events. On January 1980, Bundy went through his last ever trial, this time for the murder of his final victim, Kimberly Leach. Bundy was found guilty, once again, after less than 8 hours of deliberation, due to principally on the testimony of an eyewitness who saw him leading Leach from the schoolyard to his stolen van. On January 10, 1980, Bundy was sentenced for a third time to death by electrocution. Upon his sentence, Bundy said, "I'm not going to ask for mercy, for I find it somewhat absurd to ask for mercy for something I did not do. So I will be tortured for and will suffer for and receive a pain for the act, but I will not share the burden for the guilt." 10 years later, on the eve of his execution, on January 24th, 1989, Bundy confessed to killing 30 women. On January 24, 1989, he was finally executed. The The story and character of Ted Bundy would go on to inspire several Hollywood films, including the Academy Award-winning psychological horror film, The Silence of the Lambs. But most importantly, it would serve as a reminder to the darkness that filled our communities and took the lives of those who were innocent. Today, we remember those brave souls. So there you have it, the tale of Ted Bundy. What did you think? I want to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you haven't already done so, summon the like button to the stand so I know that I have your full support. Please also press subscribe and turn on all notifications so you can be part of the exclusive club that gets to see my videos as soon as they are uploaded. Also, my videos are available as podcasts on all major streaming platforms. And I also have exclusive podcast-only stories, so make sure you check them out. Links down below. Finally, if you ever need to contact me, you can do so on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all under the username Raphael Parvin. I read all my DMs. So thank you so much for your time today and your support. I rest my case.